This is a Fox News Alert. I am Brett Baer. We are coming to you live tonight from London. We are halfway home after conducting an exclusive interview in Cairo with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah El-Sisi. Many see this leader as a vital cog in the international machinery against ISIS terrorists. The leader of the world's largest Arab country calls for more American help against ISIS and a revolution within Islam. Back at home tonight, U.S. intelligence officials are assessing a new pledge of allegiance from Boko Haram terrorists to ISIS. This comes as the terror group encounters significant resistance to its control of Saddam Hussein's hometown in Iraq. Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen is in Washington tonight with that story. Good evening, James.
Brett, good evening. There are reports tonight, as yet unconfirmed, that ISIS has lost control of the center of Tikrit, 100 miles north of Baghdad, to a group called the Badr Corps, an Iraqi Shiite militia that U.S. officials fear will commit revenge massacres against the city's Sunni majority. Iraqi army troops, backed by Shiite militias, earlier seized the strategic village of Al-Buajil, 3 miles east of Tikrit, a city the Iraqis have hoped to wrest from the control of ISIS.
We won't come back till we liberate each part desecrated by IS militants.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah El-Sisi told Brett Baer that ISIS and al-Qaeda-related groups all come from the same parent ideology, work under the same umbrella, and he called for an Arab counterterrorism coalition.
With the help of our European and American friends, we will be able to stand up and completely counter any threats to the stability and security of our region.
As the most populous Arab nation and the world's oldest civilization, Egypt commands unique stature in the Arab world, and its armed forces, the largest in the Middle East, swiftly retaliated for ISIS beheading 21 Egyptian Coptic Christians in Libya last month, with airstrikes in that country that marked a widening of the war against ISIS. U.S. and coalition airstrikes resumed in Iraq and Syria over the weekend. Pentagon officials said the U.S. now has 2,800 troops in Iraq and has conducted 2,200 airstrikes against ISIS, or Daesh, as some call the group. America's top uniformed military officer assessed the campaign from Baghdad.
We have a great deal of intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and strike aircraft, but they're not everywhere. And so as the priorities shift, we try to put them where they will do the most damage to Daesh.
The U.S. expressed condolences for Canada's first casualty in the coalition campaign, an apparent friendly fire incident. And while the leader of Nigeria's Boko Haram, in an audio message, pledged allegiance to ISIS, the White House noted the group has previously sworn fealty to different branches of al-Qaeda.
It might lead one, at least, to conclude that Boko Haram is primarily interested in the propaganda value of such an announcement.
While there are reports of ISIS suffering from mounting internal dissent and defections from its ranks, the group remains active in the commission of atrocities in the territory it controls, including a mass hanging of 8 men believed to be Shiite soldiers in the northern Iraqi town of Hawija. Brett?
James Rosen live in Washington. James, thank you. Now back to the reason we're here in London tonight. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah El-Sisi is a key player in U.S. efforts to fight ISIS terrorists and to establish an Arab coalition to do much of the heavy lifting. Yesterday in Cairo, we spoke about a wide range of topics, including President El-Sisi's pledge to get that Arab coalition together and his disappointment in some of President Obama's moves so far. Egypt is also trying to carve out a new identity, starting with a renewed emphasis on the economy. The Egyptian Foreign Ministry says 60 countries will convene this weekend for an economic conference in Sharm el-Sheikh.
First of all, allow me at the beginning to thank you very much for coming. Thank you for having this interview. And through you, I would like to convey my best greetings to the whole American people. Well, as a matter of fact, the International Economic Conference is a reflection of the determination of Egypt and the Egyptians, whether they are people and government. If Egypt is stable, a country with 90 million people, this will represent the strongest bedrock of stability in this region. And if this region is stable, that means that Europe is all stable and the rest of the world. So what we have been doing is that we are making all what we can in order to create an investment conducive environment. We're making all what we can to restore the health of the economy.
Basically, you're open for business. Mr. President, you talked about regional stability. In recent days, you've met with the King of Jordan, the King of Saudi Arabia, about possibly forming this joint Arab force, this coalition, this alliance to counter ISIS. What is at stake for your country and the region?
We have to admit that terrorism is now a major threat not only to Egypt or even the immediate region, but it is a threat to the stability and security of the whole world. We have also to admit that it is not only ISIS that is threatening Iraq and Syria, but there are a lot of other similar terrorist organizations, and by the way, they all work under the same umbrella. They all come from the same parent ideology and work under different names. We can also say that the map of terrorism and extremism is expanding. It is not recessing, and it is not even remaining at the same level, but unfortunately it is expanding. If there is an Arab-ready force with the support of the United States, we can do a lot and we can face all the challenges that threaten the stability and security of our country.
Does that mean Egyptian forces, troops? Does it mean Egyptian airstrikes?
I mean Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain, Jordan, Egypt and other Arab countries can come together and can form this ready force that will be capable of defending our national security and encounter all the potential dangers that we may face. Egypt is an integral part of the international coalition against terrorism, but we are taking up our responsibilities to fight terrorism in Sinai and to provide security on our western borders. Egypt has been facing major terrorist threats on the Egyptian soil.
I sense, though, the U.S. stopped supplying military weapons and equipment after June 2013. They stopped for a while, and then it slowed. I sense this frustration about getting enough U.S. support to help you in your fight when I talk to people here. Is that a fair assessment?
Let me say that the United States has been helping Egypt a lot throughout 30 years or more. And Egypt now needs U.S. help, especially in the military field, more than ever, within the framework of the Egyptian counter-terrorism effort in Sinai and to defend the land of Egypt against any potential threats, especially terrorist threats. It is very important for the United States to understand that our need for the weapons and for the equipment is dire, especially at a time when the Egyptians feel that they are fighting terrorism and they would like to feel that the United States is standing by them in their fight against terrorism.
How do you and how do America's other Arab allies view U.S. leadership in the region now?
Difficult questions.
That got the English response.
As a matter of fact, we have to admit that the region is facing very tough circumstances now. Public opinion here feels a lot of threats and is really worried. And the public opinion wants to see a big response from capable countries that are able to provide assistance to them. For example, the suspending of the equipment, the US equipment and arms was a negative indication to the public opinion that the United States is not standing by the Egyptians. 30 June 2013 till now is a long time, more than a year and a half now. We thought that the United States would take time to understand what really happened in Egypt, but we need really to understand that it was and has been the will of the Egyptians.
So when what happened here in Egypt is characterized as a coup, overthrowing a democratically elected president, Mohamed Morsi, you say what? It's not that simple.
It was true. It was free and fair elections where the Egyptian people chose the former President Morsi. That is true. Because the Egyptians at that time were very sympathetic with the concept of religion that this religious faction gave to the people and offered the people. It is true that there were free and fair elections and the Egyptians chose them, but when the Egyptians wanted to remove that political leadership from office, the constitution did not give them that right to impeach a president. And so millions of Egyptians, scores of millions of Egyptians took to the street to voice their protest against the political leadership and asked for early elections in order to sort out these issues, or for the regime to step down. Unfortunately, the political leadership did not respond positively to the demands of the people, and the imminent result was that the country was going into a vicious cycle of civil war between few supporters and the striking majority of the Egyptians. A country that big with 90 million people wouldn't have been left to be eaten by a civil war or armed conflict inside it and become
Have a tape issue there. We will see the rest of this interview with President El-Sisi coming up. Meantime, continuing the news, President Obama says if he can't get the deal he wants out of Iran, he'll walk away. That flies in the face of what many Republicans and some Democrats fear, that the president will agree to anything in order to check off a box list on his legacy list. Meanwhile, serious outrage tonight over a Republican warning to Iran and the president. Here's Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry.
President Obama lashed out at dozens of Republican senators who sent a letter to Iranian leaders, which Democrats charge as interference aimed at blowing up nuclear talks with the regime.
I think it's somewhat ironic to see some members of Congress wanting to make common cause with the hardliners in Iran. It's an unusual coalition.
Also ironic, the contents of several letters the president has sent back and forth with Iran's supreme leader have been kept secret. 47 Republican senators sent an open letter to Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and others, warning any deal they sign with the U.S. could be overturned by the next president unless Congress votes on it.
They need to understand that under our Constitution, Congress plays a very important role of approving international agreements. And any deal that is not approved by the Congress won't be accepted by the Congress, now or in the future.
That sparked a furious response from Democrats, who declared the GOP will derail nuclear talks led by Secretary of State John Kerry in order to march the U.S. closer to war with Iran.
This letter is a hard slap in the face of not only the United States but our allies. This is not a time to undermine a commander-in-chief purely out of spite.
The standoff comes as a new Wall Street Journal NBC News poll found 71% of Americans believe a deal with Iran will not make a real difference in preventing the regime from obtaining nuclear weapons, despite the president's claims to the contrary.
I think what we're going to focus on right now is actually seeing whether we can get a deal or not. And once we do, then if we do, then we'll be able to make the case to the American people, and I'm confident we'll be able to implement it.
Now, there are also reports the White House may try to extend the deadline yet again beyond March 24th for these talks with Iran, a sign that after Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech, also this letter from Republicans, they may need to buy some more time. Brett?
Ed Henry live on the North Lawn. Ed, thank you.